In 1915, Australia was thrust into war, a war that became etched into the nation's identity. But long before we understood the significance of the Anzac campaign in Gallipoli, another incident took place on Australian soil, just to remind us of how precarious fighting other people's wars can be. The newspapers reported it as an attack carried out by Turks. In fact, the two men were Afghans. There was outrage by the community, and as Germany was allied to Turkey in the war, an angry mob burnt down the German club in Broken Hill. In the early hours of New Year's Day 1915, in the outback town of Broken Hill, Mullah Abdullah and Gul Muhammad fired upon a picnic train, killing 4 people and wounding many more. Then they retreated to a rocky outcrop and made their last stand against the police and local militia.
And they took refuge up here behind these rocks, and that's when the Battle of Broken Hill started.
They ended up loading up their ice cream cart on the 1st of January 1915 and headed out towards Racco Street, and then veered off over close to where the railway used to go out through Silverton, and the two men hid in the sort of trenches and waited for the train to leave the Sulphide Street station, which ventured out around that area around 10ish in the morning. And these two men opened fire on the picnic train. After they let off around 100 shots into the train, they raced off into another part of the area of Broken Hill and ran up towards the White Rocks.
This is where the bloke was he either got a stray bullet, but they must have been shooting up this way. The police must have been shooting this way, because the old Cable Hotel was over there, and when they were firing back, that's when they shot the bloke cutting the wood, apparently. It must have been a ding-dong battle.
This story begins half a century earlier. In 1860, a shipload of camels was disembarked at Port Augusta. When little was known about Australia's vast interior, camels were suggested as a solution to exploring the rugged Australian wilderness. The race to be the first across the continent from south to north had begun. The Burke and Wills expedition is one of the first to attempt the crossing, which ended with the deaths of both men. Yet little was known about the Muslim cameleers who accompanied them and survived the expedition. Dost Muhammad was one of those cameleers on the expedition. His gravesite lies by the side of the road in Menindee.
The cameleers, many of them were illiterate men, and of course they encountered prejudice, they encountered discrimination. They were never allowed to be naturalised Australians, no matter how long they stayed here. They were not permitted to bring their wives or their sons or brothers with them, because they were never meant to stay. I don't know if they thought they would find themselves living on the edge of society, because this was the rampant age of the White Australia policy, and it was race that decided whether Australia would open its door to you or slam it in your face.
I knew my grandfather, he had camels, and I knew my father had camels, because at different times I've seen them putting the nose pegs in the camels and all that. But I'm just sorry I didn't ask them about their heritage and that, you know, what they'd done and where they worked, and it must have been hard.
Them days they used to have a picnic train going from Broken Hill to Silverton, and the miners would have their picnics, or the the shop employees union have a picnic, or some other, you know, big companies have picnics, and the train would take them all out to Silverton, which is 18 mile out of Broken Hill. And when we got home from school, we'd have a feed, and the father would have 5 camels saddled up. And we'd have to take them camels from home to Silverton that night to run up and down all day on the Saturday and the Sunday giving rides.
Jack, they called him Jack.
Just Jack.
Yeah, they called him Jack. Jack Akbar. Very gentle person. Yeah, very strict in his way, you know, in his religion. Proper businessman, you know. Yeah. Hard working, yeah. Honest, very honest. Beyond the pale.
I guess Pop was just a person who liked to look good. Around the house he wore the usual bloomers and jacket and the turban, but when he went out, and especially when he was going to Parliament House, he was always dressed with a jacket on and trousers and looked very smart. I can remember the back of Beyond film being made because I hadn't quite started school and they used to let me go with them. So I used to go out with the film crew. Old Tom was a great guy. He drove the mail truck and he's become quite famous.
G'day, Beecher! Outlaw Tom Cruise!
Two battlers of the Birdsville Trek. Tom Cruise, who goes out today in a truck, and Bija, last of the lords of the desert, who carried out food and water on a string of 50 camels. Old Bija de Verish, the giant Afghan, who fought the desert by compass and by Quran.
When I even think about my grandfather and my father, as I said, I'm only a short person, but I stand 10 feet tall because I have that pride. I'm a Muhammad and I'm proud of it. And I don't care who knows it. I've been born with something that's special. And that's where it is with the other Afghan descendants. We're special. We've got something that nobody else can lay claim to.
During those days, the men that came out, they were either Afghan cameleers, and in their wake came the hawkers. They were young men with dreams, thinking that they were going to have amazing adventures and wonderful times and see these strange people with pale eyes and white skin and straw-like coloured hair. They were supposed to finish out their contracts and go back. If you like, I guess we might compare them to guest workers. But if they were our guests, then Australia was not the greatest of hosts in those days.
By the time Australia had sent its troops to fight against the Ottoman Empire, which was the seat of the Islamic Caliphate, many men like Mullah Abdullah and Gul Muhammad were unemployed and ridiculed by society. They were left without much hope or a future in this new land and desperate to survive.
Broken Hill event is an extraordinarily interesting one because it's got all these elements and building. Yes, it is building. For those people it's building, and then it becomes a boiling point and then something happens.
The shootout lasted for several hours. Most of the militia were too afraid to make a move because of the deadly aim of the two men up on the hill. However, by the early afternoon, the two Afghans were dead. Surrounded on all sides, they eventually succumbed to the hail of bullets. The bodies were taken away and secretly buried. Its location is unknown to this day. A few days after the shooting, 2 suicide notes were conveniently found on the rocks.
In the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful. This person is a subject of the Sultan. My name is Gul Padshah Muhammad Afghan Afridi. I must kill you, man, and give my life for my faith by the order of Sultan. We bid to all the faithful farewell. Gul Padshah Muhammad Afridi.